All right, so are you ready to dive into what's been happening in Argentina since Milei's win? I talk about a shakeup. I mean, radical libertarianism promises to completely overhaul the system. And judging by the news snippets you sent over, it seems like things are already getting pretty interesting down there.
Interesting might be an understatement. This is Milei we're talking about. He's not exactly known for dragging his feet, is he?
No, not at all.
And these snippets, they're all from September 16th.
Yeah,
right?
all from the 16th.
They really give you a sense of a country that's trying to figure out, well, what's headed... You know those early tremors after an earthquake before the aftershocks?
Yeah.
It feels like that, like Argentina's trying to find its footing.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these tremors, shall we? One of the biggest shockwaves was Milei vetoing those university funding increases. And it's not just the veto itself, right? He's actually called universities indoctrination centers.
Right.
It's giving me major deja vu to that whole pension increase situation.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this with other libertarian leaders around the world, this aversion to, government spending, especially when it comes to things like education.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is always to shrink the state, right?
Wow.
Get it out of as many areas as possible. But those long-term consequences, those can be rough.
Yeah, there's often a cost.
Take the UK under Thatcher, for instance. Education spending was slashed back then, and yeah, it took a while, but ultimately you saw this decline in educational attainment. And the gap between the rich and the poor, it just kept getting wider.
Right, so it's like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
So Miley's playing a long game here. But let's be real, not everyone's exactly thrilled about it. I mean, Leopoldo Moreau did not mince words, basically called Miley's tactics dictatorial.
Yeah.
Should we be expecting this level of pushback?
I think Moreau's statement, it really gets at this fear a lot of Argentinians have, right? Like this fear of going back to authoritarianism, especially given their history.
Of course, yeah.
But let's not forget, there's a whole lot of political maneuvering going on here, too. The opposition, especially those from the Peronist bloc, they see Milei as a threat. Plain and simple. He's a threat to their power, their whole way of doing things.
You know what else really struck me? The whole vibe at that congressional budget presentation. It sounded more like a scene from some tense political thriller than, an actual political event. Super tight security, boycotts, the works.
Yeah, no, it was unprecedented. You had members of the Justicialist Party, and we're talking a force in Argentine politics, a real powerhouse. Historically, they were completely absent.
Wow.
Gone. And it wasn't just them. Certain factions within the Frente de Todos, they were out too. Basically, they're drawing a line in the sand, sending a message that they will not work with him. And that sets the stage for, well, potential gridlock at best. At worst, you're looking at a full-blown crisis.
So we've got Milei making these bold moves. We've got this fired-up opposition. But what does this actually mean for everyday people in Argentina? Like, is Milei's whole economic vision panning out for them?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Because on the one hand, Milei's painted this picture of a brighter economic future for Argentina.
Yeah.
He's promised to rein in inflation, make the peso stronger, boost GDP. He's even gone so far as to say that the only possible path to prosperity is through a free market.
Right. I remember that. But then we see these train fares that have skyrocketed. Like, we're talking almost 500%.
Yeah.
And let's not forget those worker protests that are still going on. That doesn't exactly scream economic miracle. So, I mean, is there a disconnect here between the rhetoric and what people are actually experiencing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge disconnect. And it makes you wonder, who really benefits from Milei's vision? Because he campaigns as a man of the people, right?
Right.
Battling against the casta, as he calls them, this political and economic elite that he sees as corrupt and out of touch. But his actions, well, they tell a different story.
Okay, let's dig into that whole casta idea a bit more, because it feels like that's really at the heart of his appeal. So in the context of Argentina, what does that word actually mean? And how does it connect to everything we've been talking about?
Okay, so imagine a system where all the power, all the wealth, it's all concentrated in the hands of just a select few.
Okay.
And often, it's gained through corrupt means. Meanwhile, the majority of people are just struggling to make ends meet. That's the casta. That's who Milei is railing against. And he's tapped into this deep well of resentment towards this perceived elite.
Right.
He's promising to dismantle their power structures, to give the power back to the people.
And you know what really drives this home? It's Miles' big push for privatization.
Right.
Aerolíneas Argentinas, that's a prime example.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got pilots going on strike.
Yeah.
It's like classic libertarian playbook, isn't it? Shrink the government, let the free market work its magic. But is it really that simple?
I'd imagine those pilots probably have some thoughts on that.
I bet they do.
Look, I'm not saying privatization is inherently bad. It can definitely lead to some good things. You get more efficiency, maybe even better services if you've got some real competition going on. But this is Argentina we're talking about. They've
Yeah.
got this history, right?
Mhm.
This economic roller coaster ride. So privatization, it's a gamble for sure.
Exactly. And it's not just the pilots who might end up taking a hit. What about everyone else who depends on these public services? What happens when those services are suddenly in the hands of companies whose bottom line is, well, profit?
You hit the nail on the head, right? That's the million-dollar question. Will these private companies keep things affordable? Will they make sure everyone can still access these services? We're not talking about some abstract economic theory here.
No.
We're talking about real people's lives.
Okay, so speaking of real people, let's talk about these political alliances. Because right now, it's like watching a game of chess, but everyone's playing on fast forward. You've got Pipro and Macyson suddenly on Team Milei again. And then there's the UCR. They're having a full-blown identity crisis over whether they should even work with him.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to keep up with.
I think it really shows you the power of Miley's personality.
Yeah.
He's got this magnetism, this something about him, but it also shows you how deeply he's polarized the country. Politicians, they're scrambling right now. They're trying to figure out where they stand in this new reality. And all those old alliances, they're falling apart.
Crumbling.
Even Rodriguez Sahar, and that's a veteran politician right there.
Yeah.
He even called them out, called them transfugos, basically, opportunists who switch sides whenever it suits them.
So there's this sense of, wait, what just happened? Like the whole country is still processing that this guy who used to rant about the Costa on TV, I is the president now. But is he really shaking things up as much as he claimed he would?
Well, I'll give him this. His speech was definitely memorable. I mean, putting the state on a leash, social justice is violent, we don't want the state's crutches.
Catchy.
Talk about powerful rhetoric. But the question is, are those just slogans? Or are we witnessing a real break from the past?
Right, because actions speak louder than words. And some of his actions have definitely raised eyebrows, like that whole visit to La Rural, that big agricultural expo. He's clearly cozying up to the rural elite, and let's be honest, they're not exactly known for championing equality.
It's a fascinating contradiction, isn't it?
Total contradiction.
On the one hand, he's railing against the Casta, but then he turns around and cozies up to, well, one of the most powerful and entrenched interest groups in Argentina. Makes you wonder who he's really looking out for.
It feels like he's walking a tightrope. Can he really keep those powerful groups happy and still deliver on these big promises of prosperity for all Argentinians? That's a tough balancing act.
Especially given the tools he seems to prefer. I mean, he's all about that veto power. It's like he's governing by saying no to everything. And sure, that might work in the short term, but if you want real change, lasting change, you can't just strong-arm your way through.
Nope.
You've got to build consensus. You've got to bring people together.
You can't just veto your way to prosperity. It's about more than slashing budgets and taking apart the state. It's about what you choose to build in its place. While we're talking about all this, it's easy to get caught up in these political games, right? But then you've got these really human stories that are still unfolding, like that Lone Peña case.
Yeah,
It's heartbreaking.
it is.
This missing child, the accusations of corruption within that foundation. And it makes you think, can Miley's government actually handle these complex social issues, especially with this laser focus on shrinking the state?
It's a reminder, isn't it? Behind every single headline, there are real lives being impacted. And this case in particular, it raises some serious questions about justice and accountability in the age of Milei.
For sure.
If people who are supposed to be protecting vulnerable children are involved in something like this, well, it makes you question the whole system, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And these are the questions we can't lose sight of, even with all the political drama going on.
It really underscores the human cost of all these huge changes, the anxiety and uncertainty that a lot of Argentinians are feeling right now.
It all boils down to, I think, what might be the defining question of Milei's presidency.
Ooh. Okay, what's the question?
Is this a real break from the past? Are we seeing a genuine revolution in Argentinian politics? Or is this just the same old story, same power structures, same inequalities, just with a different face leading the charge?
It's a million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, Milei rode this wave of dissatisfaction all the way to the Casa Rosada. He promised to shake things up, but can he actually deliver? Or will this radical libertarianism end up leaving people behind?
We'll have to see how it all plays out.
I guess we will.
But one thing's for sure, Argentina's at a crossroads. These decisions that are being made right now, they're going to have a ripple effect for years to come.
It's definitely a fascinating time to be watching Argentina, even if it's a little unnerving at times. Hopefully this deep dive has given you a better sense of what's going on, the forces at play, what's really at stake.
And hopefully it's given you some more questions to ponder.
Exactly. This whole deep dive, it was crafted just for you.
Yeah.
Based on what you were curious about. So what really stuck with you? What other angles should we be looking at? What haven't we considered? Keep digging into those snippets. Keep those questions coming. And if you find any more sources you want to unpack, you know where to find us. Until next time, keep diving deep.